From brutally murdering their girlfriends for no reason to fatally killing innocent children, these 16 teenagers are set to spend long years in a high-security prison. Number 1. 18-year-old Riley Toliver. On the evening of January 27, 2024, in the Knoll West area of Bristol, 4 teenagers, 18-year-old Riley Toliver, 17-year-old Cody Shea Westcott, and 2 boys aged 15 and 16 carried out a violent attack that led to the deaths of 15-year-old Mason Rist and 16-year-old Max Dixon. The crime was a fatal case of mistaken identity. Mason and Max had been best friends since nursery and were walking together to get a pizza when the attack happened. Earlier that evening, a property in the Hartcliffe area connected to one of the teenage attackers had been targeted by masked youths throwing bricks and injuring a woman. Believing the incident to be part of a rivalry between local neighborhoods, the attackers set out to retaliate. The 4 teenagers were driven around in a vehicle by 45-year-old Anthony Snook, who acted as the getaway driver. While in Knoll West, the group spotted Mason and Max and wrongly assumed the boys were involved in the earlier brick attack. Toliver was armed with a baseball bat, while the other 3 teenagers carried machetes. At approximately 11:20 p.m., the attackers jumped out of the car and chased the boys down. The entire assault lasted just 33 seconds. Both Mason and Max were brutally used a knife on multiple times. CCTV from Mason's house and surrounding areas captured the lead-up and the attack itself, which was later used in court. Emergency services were called, and both boys were taken to the hospital. Despite the efforts of medical staff, Mason and Max died in the early hours of January 28, 2024, due to the severity of their stab wounds. The teenagers fled the scene shortly after the assault. 6 hours later, one of the attackers was seen picking up a McDonald's meal. The investigation quickly identified and arrested the suspects. CCTV footage, forensic evidence, and witness statements played a significant role in piecing together the events. The 4 teenagers and the adult driver were charged with 2 counts of murder. During the trial at Bristol Crown Court, the prosecution emphasized the mistaken identity and the lack of justification for the attack. The defense acknowledged the involvement of the youths, but contested the intent. The jury, after reviewing the evidence, found all 5 guilty of murder. Chloe Rist, Mason's sister, delivered an emotional victim impact statement during the sentencing. Holding up a small pouch containing Mason's ashes and a lock of his blood-stained hair, she addressed the 4 teenagers. She also explained that Mason had been diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, describing him as vulnerable and harmless. On December 19, 2024, Riley Toliver was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years and 47 days. Cody Shea Westcott was sentenced to life with a minimum of 23 years and 44 days. The 16-year-old boy received life with a minimum of 18 years, and the 15-year-old was sentenced to life with a minimum of 15 years. Anthony Snook, the driver, was sentenced to life with a minimum of 38 years. As of May 2025, all 4 teenagers remain in prison. Riley Toliver has served 1 year and 4 months and will be eligible for release at age 41. Cody Shea Westcott has served the same and will be eligible for release at approximately age 40. The unnamed 16-year-old release at age 34, and the 15-year-old at age 30. Number 2, 18-year-old Danyal Hussein. On June 5, 2020, 18-year-old Danyal Hussein murdered 2 sisters, 46-year-old Biba Henry and 27-year-old Nicole Smallman, in Friant Country Park in Wembley, northwest London. Biba Henry, who was a social worker, and Nicole Smallman, who was a freelance photographer, were in the park celebrating Biba's birthday. After a joyful evening with friends, the sisters remained at the park alone, continuing their celebration into the early hours. Around this time, Hussein arrived at the park armed with a knife and driven by a delusional belief rooted in occult practices. Hussein had drafted a handwritten contract using his own blood in which he pledged to sacrifice women in return for winning the Mega Millions super jackpot lottery. The pact addressed to a demon he referred to as Mighty King Lucifuge Rophakal committed him to performing a minimum of 6 sacrifices every 6 months for as long as he was free and physically capable. At approximately 4:19 a.m., Hussein attacked the sisters. He used the knife on Biba Henry 8 times and Nicole Smallman 28 times. After the murder, he dragged their bodies into a wooded area of the park, leaving them concealed and intertwined. Nicole's boyfriend found their bodies the following day after they failed to return home. He had used location data from a mobile phone to trace their steps, eventually discovering the scene himself before contacting emergency services. Forensic investigators quickly recovered a blood-stained knife near the bodies. DNA evidence linked the knife and the victims' bodies to Hussein. Surveillance footage also captured him purchasing knives and returning home after the attack with injuries. He later sought hospital treatment, claiming to have been mugged. Investigators believe a severe injury to his hand during the murders prevented him from continuing his intended killing spree. Hussein was arrested on July 1, 2020, at his mother's home in Blackheath, southeast London. During the search of his bedroom, police found multiple handwritten demonic pacts, including one committing him to murder women in exchange for lottery success and protection from detection. Devices seized from his room, including an iPad, revealed some internet activity involving occult forums and dark web content, but police were unable to access his full browsing history due to encryption and international legal barriers. Hussein had previously been referred to the UK's Prevent Counter-Terrorism program in 2017, at age 15 after concerns at his school. He was later assessed under the Channel program and discharged in 2018 with no active concerns of extremism. At the time of the murders, he was living with his mother and attending Orpington College. The trial took place at the Old Bailey, where he refused to testify in his own defense and denied involvement throughout proceedings. He was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and possession of a bladed article. The court heard that Hussein displayed no remorse and continued to claim innocence despite overwhelming forensic and surveillance evidence. The mother of the victims, the Venerable Mina Smallman, the Church of England's first black female archdeacon, delivered a statement describing the murder as incomprehensible. She stated that no one expects their children to die before them, but to have 2 of your 3 children murdered overnight is just incomprehensible. She added that if any good comes out of this, at least another 4 women will not meet a similar end in a so-called pact with a so-called demon. The detective inspector described Hussein as a dangerous, arrogant, and violent individual who from the outset has shown no remorse or acceptance of his actions. On October 28, 2021, Danyal Hussein was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. As of May 2025, he has served approximately 3 years and 10 months in prison. He was 18 at the time of the crime and will be eligible for release no earlier than the year 2056, by which time he will be 54 years old. Number 3. 16-year-old Cartel Bushnell. On the evening of June 10, 2023, in the Weston area of Bath, Somerset, 16-year-old Cartel Bushnell was involved in a fatal attack that led to the death of another 16-year-old boy, Mikey Roynan. The attack took place during a girl's 16th birthday party. Alongside Bushnell were 2 other 16-year-olds, Shane Cunningham and Leo Knight. All 3 teenagers had traveled together from Wiltshire to the party. CCTV footage later confirmed that the boys brought knives with them to the event. Leo Knight was seen on the bus with a knife tucked into his trousers, which was visible when he bent down. The gathering was meant to be a celebration, but tensions quickly escalated. According to police and court proceedings, an argument broke out in the garden of the host's property. During the confrontation, Shane Cunningham brutally attacked Mikey Roynan in the neck with a large zombie knife, a type of weapon that is increasingly linked to youth violence in the UK. Though Cunningham inflicted the fatal wound, Bushnell and Knight were present and actively involved. After Mikey was attacked, he managed to walk from the garden to the driveway before collapsing due to significant blood loss. But unfortunately, he did not survive his injuries. Immediately after the incident, the three boys fled the scene. CCTV footage later captured them speaking about the attack and disposing of their clothing and weapons. Police later recovered the murder weapon from a nearby drain. The boys were arrested shortly after and charged. The investigation led by Avon and Somerset police revealed that all three teenagers had denied the charge of murder. However, during the trial at Bristol Crown Court, the jury found Shane Cunningham guilty of murder. Cartel Bushnell and Leo Knight were both found guilty of manslaughter after being acquitted of the more serious charge. The lead investigator on the crime described the crime as utterly senseless and emphasized the devastating impact it had on both the victims and the perpetrators' families. "Justice has been served," he said, "but it does not bring me or my team any satisfaction." In victim impact statements read out during sentencing, Mikey Roynan's family shared their overwhelming grief. His mother, Haley Ryle, stated that her life changed the day her son was murdered. His grandmother, Teresa Owen, tearfully stated that she would swap places with Mikey in a heartbeat, if she could. The sentencing took place in March 2024, and the judge sentenced Shane Cunningham to life in custody, with a minimum term of 16 years before being eligible for parole. Cartel Bushnell was sentenced to 9 years in detention for manslaughter. Leo Knight received a sentence of 9 years and 6 months. The judge also lifted reporting restrictions, allowing the identities of the three teenagers to be publicly released for the first time. He described the case as part of a growing plague of knife crime that continues to take lives and devastate communities. As of May 2025, Cartel Bushnell has served just over 1 year of his 9-year sentence. He was 16 at the time of the crime and will be 25 years old at the time of his scheduled release, if he serves his full sentence. Number 4. 16-year-old Logan Marcveigh. Logan Marcveigh was 16 years old at the time of the murder of 15-year-old Holly Newton. He was a teenage resident of Gateshead, England, and attended a special education school in Tyneside due to autism and a low IQ. Marcveigh had previously been in an 18-month relationship with Holly Newton, a student from Haltwhistle, Northumberland. The two met while participating in Army cadets. After a period of dating, Holly decided to break out of the relationship. After their relationship ended, Marcveigh struggled to accept the breakup, and his behavior became increasingly concerning to those around them. On the evening of January 26, 2023, the day before the attack, Marcveigh left his home in Gateshead and traveled over 40 miles to Holly's residence in Haltwhistle. He loitered near her house until local police located him at approximately 1 a.m. and returned him home. His mother had reported him missing earlier that evening. Holly's mother, Michaela Trussler, had been aware of his past troubling behavior and advised her daughter to stay inside the following day if he was seen nearby. Despite this, on January 27th, the next day, Marcveigh left school early and took a bus to Hexham. There, he began following Holly around the town center as she spent time with friends. Marcveigh was seen on CCTV wearing a mask and a baseball cap. He approached Holly at a bus stop and asked to speak with her privately. Though visibly unhappy, she eventually agreed and followed him into an alleyway near a pizza shop. At approximately 5 p.m. in that alley, Marcveigh launched a sudden and violent knife attack. He had brought a kitchen knife from his home. Within less than a minute, he brutally used the knife and slashed Holly 36 times. 12 of those were stab wounds, 19 were slash wounds, and 5 were defensive injuries to her hand, suggesting that she tried to resist. A teenage boy who heard Holly's screams ran to intervene. Marcveigh used the knife on him as well, wounding him in the process. Bystanders and shop workers attempted to help, and emergency services were called. Holly was taken to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, but unfortunately she was later pronounced dead. Logan Marcveigh was then arrested at the scene. He was later charged with the murder of Holly Newton and the wounding with intent of the teenage boy who tried to intervene. He pleaded not guilty to murder, instead admitting to manslaughter on the grounds that he had not intended to murder Holly, claiming that his mental state had deteriorated and that he had originally brought the knife to use on himself. His trial began in August 2024 at Newcastle Crown Court. Due to his learning difficulties and diagnosis of autism, he followed much of the proceedings remotely from secure accommodation. Prosecutors argued that Marcveigh had acted out of jealousy and an inability to cope with rejection. The jury was presented with evidence that Marcveigh had stalked Holly and had been upset that she was seeing someone new. After deliberation, the jury convicted Marcveigh of murder and the wounding with intent of the second victim. The judge cited the seriousness of the crime and the broader national conversation about knife violence and violence against women and girls as reasons for naming the defendant. During sentencing, the court noted that Marcveigh had never previously been convicted of any crimes. His autism and low cognitive functioning were acknowledged, but did not exempt him from full accountability for his actions. The judge emphasized the premeditated nature of the attack and rejected the claim that the attack had not been intentional. Logan Marcveigh was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. This means he will become eligible for parole at the earliest in 2039. As he was 16 years old at the time of the offense, he would be 32 by the time of possible release, assuming no parole is granted earlier or delays occur. Following sentencing, Marcveigh did not make a formal apology to the court or to Holly's family. As of March 2025, Logan Marcveigh remains in custody at a secure youth detention facility, having served just over 1 year of his life sentence. Number 5. 16-year-old Thomas Wei Huang. On June 9, 2023, a violent attack occurred at Blundell's School, a private boarding school in Tiverton, Devon. The perpetrator was Thomas Wei Huang, a 16-year-old Malaysian student. His victims were 2 male dorm mates aged 15 and 16, and a housemaster, 38-year-old Henry Roff Sylvester. Thomas Wei Huang had arrived in the UK from Malaysia to attend Blundell's School, following in the footsteps of his older brother. He described being excited to study in a UK boarding school, and reported being generally happy at Blundell's despite disliking sports and the food. Huang came from a wealthy background, and during school breaks, he and his brother would stay in their family's London home in Battersea, rather than returning to Malaysia. On the night of the attack, Huang was wearing only his boxer shorts. Armed with 3 claw hammers, he waited until his 2 dorm mates were asleep in their cabin-style bunk beds. At approximately 1 a.m., he climbed into their beds and launched the assault. The victims suffered extensive and brutal injuries, including skull fractures, internal bleeding, and other critical injuries. The attack was interrupted when housemaster Henry Roff Sylvester was awakened by the noise and went to investigate. He entered the dormitory and encountered Huang, who turned and struck him multiple times over the head with one of the hammers. Mr. Roff Sylvester suffered 6 blows to the head. He managed to stumble back into the corridor and raise the alarm. Another student, hearing the commotion, called emergency services, initially believing there was an intruder on campus. When police arrived, they discovered the 2 boys gravely injured in their beds. Huang was arrested shortly afterward. At the time of arrest, he told officers he had been sleepwalking. In court, Huang admitted carrying out the attacks, but pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of attempted murder by reason of insanity, citing sleepwalking and a belief in an impending zombie apocalypse. He stated that he kept hammers by his bed for protection. Huang claimed to be preparing for a zombie apocalypse, referencing shows such as The Walking Dead. He told the court he believed the apocalypse was real and that he needed to be ready to defend himself from vicious creatures. He also acknowledged having 2 mobile phones at school, one of which was hidden so he could use it at night. During the investigation and subsequent trial at Exeter Crown Court, psychiatric evaluations revealed that Huang had been diagnosed with autism. It was also disclosed that he had developed an unhealthy obsession with violence and violent films. Prosecutors described how Huang had planned the attack and had deliberately waited until his victims were most vulnerable. The jury rejected Huang's sleepwalking and insanity defense. In October 2024, he was found guilty of 3 counts of attempted murder following a 10-week trial. One of the boys has since suffered permanent life-altering injuries. Huang was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 12 years. He showed remorse in court, stating, "I feel very terribly sorry for all 3 individuals because of what I did to them. I feel very sorry for everyone, the families and themselves." Initially, Huang's identity was protected due to his age. However, in November 2024, a judge lifted the reporting restrictions after confirming that no further anonymity applications would be made by his legal team. As of May 2025, Thomas Wei Huang has served nearly 2 years of his life sentence. He was 16 at the time of the attack. If released after serving the minimum 12-year term, he will be 28 years old. He remains incarcerated in a UK youth detention facility, awaiting eventual transfer to an adult prison upon reaching the age of majority. Number 6. 16-year-old Stephen Miles. On January 24, 2014, in a flat on Amy Road in Oxted, Surrey, 16-year-old Stephen Miles brutally murdered his girlfriend, 17-year-old Elizabeth Thomas. The crime took place in his family home. Stephen Miles was an A-level politics student at the time of the incident. He lived with his family and had previously been diagnosed with traits associated with the autism spectrum, along with signs of anxiety and narcissistic personality traits. His parents had sought medical and psychological help for him in 2012 after he had an episode. By late 2013, mental health professionals assessed him as having made good progress and discharged him from treatment. On the day of the crime, he invited his girlfriend Elizabeth Thomas to his home after school. It was a routine visit for the couple. Once inside his bedroom, he launched a sudden and brutal attack. He brutally used a knife on her multiple times. After she died, he used saws and other cutting tools from his father's tree surgery business to dismember her body. He separated her body part and hid some under his desk. When his sister returned home about an hour after the murder, he told her that Ed made him to do something bad. Ed, according to Miles, was an alter ego. He said it was a voice in his head that instructed him to murder. He would later claim that Ed was the driving force behind his actions. He did not attempt to flee the scene. Emergency services were contacted shortly afterward, and he was arrested without resistance. During the investigation and subsequent trial, Miles pleaded guilty to the murder of Elizabeth Thomas. The court heard from psychiatric experts who stated that Miles was not psychotic and did not suffer from any mental disorder. Instead, they concluded that Ed was likely a manifestation of anxiety or a dissociative experience. Prosecutors and mental health professionals both confirmed that Miles had a long-standing fascination with horror films and had expressed admiration for the fictional character Dexter Morgan from the American television show Dexter, who was a forensics expert who lives a double life as a serial killer. Miles had expressed a desire to emulate Dexter, and, according to the court, he had internalized the character's dual life. In the trial held at Guildford Crown Court, the prosecution argued that the murder was premeditated. It was presented that Miles had told a previous girlfriend about fantasies involving murder and had once briefly attempted to choke her. The presiding judge described the crime as one of utmost gravity, with features rarely heard in any court. He ruled that Miles would serve a mandatory life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. The judge explicitly stated that had Miles been an adult, he would have considered imposing a whole life term. Miles remained silent during the sentencing, dressed in a white shirt and black tie, and showed no visible emotion. The judge warned the courtroom in advance about the graphic nature of the case. Elizabeth Thomas's family was present and later issued a public statement describing her as kind, caring, and gentle. Defense counsel characterized the murder as chilling and blood-curdling and stated that Miles's actions had likely been influenced by media depictions of violence. He acknowledged that while the presence of the alter ego, Ed, was not fully understood, psychiatrists agreed Miles had no valid psychiatric defense for diminished responsibility. Following sentencing, Miles was transferred to a secure facility. He was imprisoned at HMP Swinfen Hall, a prison in Staffordshire that holds young adult males. The facility provides psychological support, education, and vocational training. His case remains under periodic review as part of the standard life sentence protocol. As of March 2025, Stephen Miles has served 11 years of his sentence. He remains incarcerated at HMP Swinfen Hall. He was 16 years old at the time of the murder and will be 41 years old at the earliest possible date for release consideration in 2039. Number 7. 17-year-old Hassan Santamu. On the morning of September 27, 2023, 17-year-old Hassan Santamu fatally stabbed 15-year-old Eliane Andam outside the Whitgift shopping centre in Croydon, South London. The incident took place just after 8:30 a.m. as Eliane was on her way to school. The attack, which unfolded in front of commuters and school children, ended a young life over a dispute involving a teddy bear and personal belongings. Hassan Santamu, then a teenager from New Addington, had previously been in a relationship with one of Eliane's friends, who remains unnamed for legal reasons. The day before the murder, the two girls saw Santamu at the shopping center and teased him. This seemingly minor interaction deeply angered Santamu. He later told a friend he couldn't let the teasing to slide. The following day, a meeting was arranged between Santamu and his ex-girlfriend for the return of personal items. Santamu wore gloves and a face covering and armed himself with a kitchen knife. He claimed the purpose of the meeting was to return a teddy bear in exchange for clothes. When he arrived without the bear, a confrontation ensued. Eliane stood up for her friend. According to court testimony, she playfully grabbed a bag belonging to Santamu during the argument. In response, Santamu chased Eliane, tackled her, and brutally used the knife on her multiple times as she lay on the ground. Witnesses reported that she pleaded for him to stop. Despite her cries, he continued the attack, ultimately attacking her fatally in the neck. Emergency services were called immediately, but Eliane was pronounced dead at the scene. Her murder shocked the community and drew national attention. Santamu fled, but was arrested shortly afterward. During the police investigation, Santamu claimed diminished responsibility, citing autism spectrum disorder as a factor that impaired his ability to control his emotions. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but denied murder. However, a jury at the Old Bailey rejected his defense and convicted him of murder by majority verdict in January 2025. The court learned that Santamu had a troubling history of violence. At age 12, he had received a police caution for bringing a knife to school. Other behaviors included putting girls in headlocks, making violent threats, and acting aggressively toward animals. After being taken into custody following Eliane's death, Santamu continued to display disturbing behavior. While held at Oak Hill Secure Training Center in Milton Keynes, he assaulted another detainee. In one incident, he told a fellow detainee that he would do it again, and threatened to murder the other child's mother. In another, he attacked a child in the face, knocking him down. At his sentencing on March 13, 2025, The judge sentenced Santamu to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years. She also imposed a concurrent 1-year sentence for illegal possession of a knife. In her remarks, the judge Bold confronted him, stating that Eliane was 15 when he murdered her, and she will always remain just 15 and never realize the potential of her life. The courtroom heard victim impact statements from Eliane's family. Her mother described her daughter as vibrant, creative, and purposeful, saying, "Now the music has stopped, the laughter has gone, all that is left is a deafening silence that echoes through my life." She directly addressed Santamu, stating, "You brutally murdered her in the most humiliating way in broad daylight, mercilessly murdered her on the floor as she begged for mercy. Your actions were senseless and evil." Her father added that the thought of her final moments torments him, wondering if she was calling out for him, hoping that he would save her, but he wasn't there. He continued by saying that the guilt will weigh on my heart for the rest of my life. After the sentencing, outside the court, Eliane's family voiced disappointment with the sentence. Pastor Mark Rossell, speaking on their behalf, added that the family believed the justice system had failed to reflect the sheer brutality of the crime, and said the sentence left them feeling abandoned and unheard. After his sentencing, he was transferred HMP Belmarsh, a Category A prison in London. As of March 2025, Hassan Santamu has served less than 1 year of his life sentence. He was 17 at the time of the murder and will be 40 years old when he becomes eligible for release. Number 8. 16-year-old Yura Varybrus. On July 23, 2023, 16-year-old Yura Varybrus fatally stabbed 17-year-old Charlie Kosser at a private summer party held at a farmhouse marquee in Warnham, West Sussex. The attack occurred in a crowded dance floor setting during an event attended by over 100 people. Charlie Kosser had attended the party with friends. He had recently begun a groundsman apprenticeship and was saving up for his first holiday abroad with friends. The atmosphere at the party was meant to be celebratory, marking the end of the academic year. Varybrus arrived at the same party with his own group of friends. During the evening, multiple complaints were made regarding Varybrus's behavior, specifically towards a girl at the event. As a result, he and his group were asked to leave the premises. Shortly after, a fight broke out between Varybrus, Charlie Kosser, and 2 other boys on the dance floor inside the marquee. It was during this altercation that Varybrus then brought out a knife and used it on Charlie 3 times. The tragic occurred on a crowded dance floor with many attendees present. After the attack, Charlie was found lying on the grass outside. Friends and partygoers quickly realized that he had been brutally attacked. They immediately called for emergency services, and Charlie was transported to a hospital. On his way to the hospital, he suffered a cardiac arrest due to internal bleeding. Unfortunately, after numerous efforts to stabilize him, he died 2 days later. Varybrus was arrested after witnesses identified him and relayed what they had seen and heard. The murder weapon was never recovered. He was charged with murder and possession of a bladed article. Witnesses testified that Varybrus was seen drenched in blood immediately after the incident. Multiple individuals reported hearing him confessing to carrying out the crime. A guest also unintentionally captured a portion of the fight on video while recording friends dancing under disco lights. The trial was held at Brighton Crown Court. Evidence from witnesses, video footage, and forensic details were presented. The court also heard that Charlie and Varybrus had not previously known each other, and the violence erupted spontaneously during the fight. Though it is unclear whether Varybrus brought the knife to the event himself, the court accepted that he had access to it throughout the night and used it during the confrontation. Varybrus did not take the stand during his trial and denied both charges. On conviction, Yura Varybrus was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years for the murder of Charlie Kosser. He was also found guilty of possession of a bladed article. During the sentencing, Charlie's mother, Tara Kosser, spoke, stating that they have the life sentence, and Charlie has no life. No sentence will be long enough for her child's murderer, emphasizing that the sentence doesn't bring Charlie back to life. She described her son as calm, chilled, and excited about his future. After Charlie's death, the family established a charity called Charlie's Promise and dedicated it to raising awareness and preventing knife crime. Following sentencing, Varybrus was transferred to HMP Cookham Wood, a young offender institution in Kent. He did not make a final public statement during the hearing, and there was no visible reaction from him when the sentence was delivered. According to court observations, he remained silent and avoided eye contact with the gallery. As of May 2025, Yura Varybrus is serving his life sentence in a UK prison. He has served nearly 8 months of his 16-year minimum term. If released at the earliest possible date, he would be 32 years old, having committed the crime at age 16. Number 9. 14-year-old Bardia Shojaeifard. Bardia Shojaeifard was 14 years old when he carried out a fatal knife attack on fellow teenager Alfie Lewis. The incident took place on the afternoon of November 7th, 2023, on Church Road, outside a primary school in Horsforth, Leeds. Shojaeifard, who had no prior criminal record, lived with his family in Leeds. He was described in court as being from a supportive home and as an outwardly normal teenager. However, law enforcement and trial proceedings later revealed that he harbored a long-standing interest in knives, with several photos of him posing with blades found on his mobile phone. On the day of the incident, Alfie Lewis, also aged 15, was on his way to meet some friends after school. Witness testimony later confirmed that Shojaeifard approached him deliberately and without warning. Armed with a 13-centimeter kitchen knife, which he had taken from a drawer at home and carried with him throughout the school day, Shojaeifard confronted Alfie outside St. Margaret's Church of England primary school. Eyewitnesses, including schoolchildren, staff, and bystanders, saw the two teenagers in a brief interaction. Alfie was seen backing away, saying, "Chill out," and "What are you doing?" before Shojaeifard pushed him to the ground and used the knife on him twice, once in the leg and once in his vital organ. The latter wound pierced Alfie, causing fatal internal bleeding. Shojaeifard fled the scene immediately after the attack and discarded the knife nearby. Emergency services responded quickly, and Alfie was transported to the hospital. Despite efforts to save him, he died a short time later. Shojaeifard was arrested at his home approximately 1 hour after the incident. The recovered knife was matched to a kitchen set at his residence, and traces of Alfie's blood were found on the blade. He was charged with the murder of Alfie Lewis. During the investigation, police found multiple images on his phone featuring knives, including one edited image showing a blade photoshopped into his hand. One of the pictures had been taken during a family trip to Iran. The knife used in the attack had its handle painted black, suggesting a level of premeditation. At trial in May 2024, Shojaeifard pleaded not guilty to murder, claiming self-defense. He testified that Alfie had previously threatened him, referring to a Halloween encounter in which Alfie allegedly said, "Give me the bag or something worse than last time is going to happen." Shojaeifard stated that he felt threatened and began carrying a knife for protection. However, the prosecution presented evidence suggesting that the attack was deliberate and without immediate provocation. The jury at Leeds Crown Court unanimously found Shojaeifard guilty of murder. On July 12, 2024, the judge sentenced Shojaeifard to life detention with a minimum term of 13 years. During sentencing, the court heard victim impact statements from Alfie Lewis's family. His mother, Heather Lane, described the profound emotional loss of her youngest son, whom she called her little mate. She told the court she would never forgive Shojaeifard. Alfie's aunt, Emily Lane, criticized the sentence as insufficient and emphasized the family's devastation. In response to the verdict, Shojaeifard showed limited outward emotion. There was no reported outburst or reaction during sentencing. He made no formal apology or public statement to the court or the victim's family. He was transferred to HMP Wetherby, a facility in West Yorkshire designated for young offenders. As of March 2025, he remains incarcerated at HMP Wetherby. He has served approximately 1 year and 4 months of his sentence. Given the minimum term of 13 years, and having committed the offense at age 14, he will be eligible for release in 2037 at the age of 27. Number 10. 15-year-old Leighton Ames. On the evening of October 3, 2022, 14-year-old Tomasz Olesak was fatally murdered in White Hills Nature Park, Gateshead, by another teenager, Leighton Ames, who was also 14 at the time of the attack. Tomasz Olesak was originally from Poland. He had moved to Gateshead with his family in 2012. Described as kind, respectful, and sporty, he was a popular figure among his peers and known to detest violence. His murderer, Leighton Ames, also 14 at the time, had a known history of disruptive behavior. He had previously been excluded from primary school for threatening to use a knife on a teacher, and later from secondary school for committing arson by setting fire to a plastic window. Images recovered by police after his arrest showed an interest in knives. On the night of the attack, Ames had taken a serrated steak knife from his kitchen and brought it with him as he went to meet his 14-year-old girlfriend. As they walked together through White Hills Nature Park at around 8 p.m., a group of teenagers began following them. Ames claimed he brought the knife for reassurance and carried it in his jacket pocket. However, evidence disputed this claim, stating that he was the aggressor and had not suffered any significant injuries, only a minor thumb wound. According to him, he was punched and kicked by the group and claimed he pulled out the knife during the attack in self-defense. During the confrontation, Ames attacked Tomasz once with the knife, causing an 8-centimeter deep wound that fatally injured him. After the attack, Ames reportedly shouted, "I've wetted your boy," to the group of youths, a statement described by the judge as being delivered triumphantly. Following the stabbing, Ames also slashed the coat of another boy in the group and was later convicted of attempted grievous bodily harm for that act. He admitted to carrying a knife, but denied the charges of murder, claiming he did not know he had used the knife on Tomasz. After the incident, he hid the knife in a nearby bush and messaged a friend, stating he would have it melted. Tomasz was rushed to hospital, but died the following day from the stab wound. His mother had been called to the scene and attempted to save her son's life, but was unsuccessful. The police arrested Ames shortly after the stabbing. During the investigation, disturbing images of knives were found on his phone. In a victim impact statement, the victim's mother stated that she regularly had flashbacks to that night, while remembering how she was trying desperately to keep her boy alive. The court also heard about Amy's history of violent threats and disruptive behavior in school settings. At Newcastle Crown Court in June 2023, Ames was convicted of murder and attempting to cause grievous bodily harm. The judge sentenced him to detention for life with a minimum term of 12 years. He also received a 13-month sentence for an attempted charge to be served concurrently. After the sentencing, Ames was placed in secure accommodation where he made progress in his education, improving his reading age from 10 to 13. His educational improvements were noted by the judge, but this did not mitigate the severity of the crime. Tomasz's family, still mourning their son's death, expressed their heartbreak and ongoing grief, knowing that their son's future was taken in such a senseless act of violence. As of May 2025, Leighton Ames has served approximately 2.5 years of his minimum 12-year sentence. He was 14 years old at the time of the crime, and will be eligible for release at the age of 26, but will remain on license for life and can be recalled to custody at any time. Number 11, 16-year-old Jordan Rance. On the evening of November 17, 2023, 16-year-old Jordan Rance fatally stabbed 49-year-old Paul Marsh at a flat on Samuel Street in Atherton, Wigan. Rance was at the property with Marsh and several other individuals when a minor disagreement escalated into a deadly encounter. According to eyewitnesses, the argument between Jordan and Marsh grew heated. In the midst of the dispute, Jordan lunged toward Marsh with a knife and used it on him in the shoulder. The blade severed Marsh's carotid artery, a critical vessel that supplies blood to the brain. Witnesses reported that Marsh fell back onto a sofa immediately after being attacked. Jordan and another teen immediately fled the scene, while others at the address called emergency services and attempted first aid. Police and paramedics arrived shortly after 6:08 p.m. and found Paul Marsh unconscious with a critical injury. Despite efforts to save him, he died a short time later. A murder investigation was launched by Greater Manchester Police's Major Incident Team. Jordan, who had fled, was soon identified as the prime suspect. He was arrested and charged with murder. In his initial interview, he claimed that Marsh had pulled out a shiny object and demanded his phone, leading to a struggle. He stated that he had pushed Marsh away and didn't realize Marsh had been injured when he left the flat. This account was later proven false. Jordan had deliberately tried to mislead investigators with the help from a 17-year-old friend who also gave a fabricated version of events to police. Both teens admitted they had coordinated their false story, believing it would make them look good and possibly reduce or eliminate Rance's criminal responsibility. The prosecutor told the court that the friend later admitted, stating that he and Jordan had their story ready if they do get nicked. He continued by saying that they had planned that Jordan will tell the police his side of the story and say his name. Then the police will come to him and he would say the same story, and that'll make them both look good. He claimed that he was Jordan's alibi to get Jordan out of the crime. Evidence also revealed that Jordan and Marsh had met weeks earlier and had a previous altercation. It was confirmed that he posed for selfies with knives and attempted to delete evidence by resetting phones and switching SIM cards. Despite several shifting narratives from him, the court determined the killing was intentional. Investigation also revealed that Jordan was known to have a troubled history, including 6 previous convictions for 18 offenses, most of which were related to driving, and 1 count of wounding with intent. He had been described in court as a young person who had experienced significant life difficulties and was vulnerable to negative influence. He was found guilty of murder at Manchester Minshull Street, Crown Court, in March 2024. On May 8, 2024, he was sentenced to life in custody with a minimum term of 21 years. During sentencing, the judge lifted reporting restrictions, allowing him to be named despite his age. Following his sentencing, Jordan did not show any outward sign of distress, but remained quiet. Through his legal representative, he expressed remorse and acknowledged the irreversible consequences of his actions. However, he maintained that the situation escalated unexpectedly and that he had not intended to murder Marsh. The teen who attempted to cover for Jordan was later charged and pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice. He was sentenced to a 12-month detention and training order, of which half will be served in a young offenders institution. As of May 2025, Jordan Rance has served 1 year of his 21-year minimum sentence. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime and will be at least 37 years old when eligible for release. Number 12, 19-year-old Axel Rudakubana. Axel Rudakubana was 18 years old when he left his home in Banks, Lancashire, on the morning of 29th July 2024. That day, he carried out one of the worst child-targeted attacks in modern British history. The victims were 3 girls: Alice da Silva Aguiar, aged 9, Baby King, aged 6, and Elsie Stancombe, aged 7. 10 others, including 8 children and 2 adults, were also injured in the attempted murders. Ruda Cubana began his day by booking a taxi to Hart Street in Southport. His destination was the Hart Space, where 26 children, mostly girls between the ages of 6 and 10, were participating in a Taylor Swift-themed yoga and dance workshop. He was armed with a knife that he had purchased online a few days prior. Upon arriving at the scene, Ruda Cubana left the taxi without paying and entered the building. Within moments, he began a brutal and sustained attack targeting the young children and adults present. Emergency services responded swiftly after multiple 999 calls were placed from the location. Paramedics and police arrived to a scene of devastation. Despite their efforts, Alice, Bebe, and Elsie were pronounced dead. 10 others suffered serious injuries, but survived. Following the attack, Ruda Cubana was arrested and taken into custody. A thorough search of his home uncovered a significant volume of disturbing materials. Police discovered ingredients capable of producing ricin, a highly toxic biological agent. They also found a PDF file titled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda training manual, which falls under prohibited possession per Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Additional evidence showed that Ruda Cubana had viewed and downloaded violent content online and had conducted extensive research into mass violence and genocide. Ruda Cubana pleaded guilty to all 16 charges against him on the 20th of January 2025 at Liverpool Crown Court. During the sentencing on the 12th of March 2025, he was given 13 life sentences. The judge, Mr. Justice Goose, ordered a minimum term of 52 years before he can be considered for parole. In his sentencing remarks, the judge stated that there were 26 children at the party. All of them were happy and enjoying themselves before the wicked individual targeted those children for the horrific, extreme violence he was intent upon. It was such extreme violence of the utmost seriousness it was difficult to comprehend. It's likely he will never be released and will spend the rest of his life in custody. The case drew national attention, not only for the scale of the violence, but also for the lack of clear motive. Ruda Cubana had grown up in a religious, church-going household and had shown early interest in performing arts. At one point, he appeared in a Children in Need advert dressed as Doctor Who. However, by the time he completed secondary school, he had become increasingly reclusive and withdrawn. Despite an earlier assessment by counter-terrorism officials who had concluded he did not pose a significant threat, following the conviction, Ruda Cubana was transferred to HMP Wakefield, a high-security prison in West Yorkshire, designated for individuals convicted of serious violent crimes. As of March 2025, he has served less than 1 year of his life sentence. Given his minimum term of 52 years, he will not be eligible for parole until 2077, by which time he will be 71 years old. Number 13, Kieran Earnshaw and Luke Gokriger. Kieran Earnshaw, who was 18 at the time, and Luke Gokriger, who was 15, were responsible for the fatal murder of 53-year-old Robert Wilson outside the Thornton and Ross pharmaceutical plant on Manchester Road, Huddersfield, on the night of January 16, 2020. Kieran Earnshaw had a known history of violent behavior, including a prior incident in October 2016 when he used a knife on a fellow student twice in the stomach. Luke Gokriger, significantly younger, had not been publicly associated with previous violent crimes, though he was seen associating with older peers and engaging in substance misuse in the weeks leading up to the incident. On the night in question, both boys were under the influence of high drinks and a combination of hard substances, including a synthetic sedative, and they took it alongside vodka and other intoxicants. The incident began when Mr. Wilson, a respected night shift supervisor, exited the factory along with his colleagues Paul Thulis and John Badejo, to speak with the two teenagers loitering in the company car park. CCTV footage later revealed that the interaction rapidly escalated into a violent and fatal assault. Without provocation, Earnshaw produced a 50-centimeter blue-handled samurai sword from his tracksuit bottoms and began striking Mr. Wilson. During the prolonged attack, Gaukroger could be heard repeatedly requesting the weapon, shouting, "Pass me the shank, pass me the shank." An audio captured from Mr. Wilson's phone call to the factory's security firm recorded both the assault and his pleas for mercy. Gaukroger, who took possession of the sword, was heard shouting and indicating that he was aiming for the head. The teenagers proceeded to strike Mr. Wilson more than 100 times, paused momentarily to catch their breath and search his pockets, then jointly resumed the attack. At one stage, both were seen holding the sword together in an attempt to sever the victim's body. Mr. Badejo, who attempted to intervene, was seriously injured during the attack. He and Mr. Tholis were ultimately forced to flee the scene. Police officers responding to the emergency found Earnshaw still using the sword in a sawing motion against Mr. Wilson's body. Earnshaw was tasered twice before being subdued, and Gaukroger was restrained using incapacitant spray. Both teenagers were arrested on site and later charged. In interviews, Earnshaw appeared disoriented, slurred his speech, and questioned the reasons for his arrest, citing previous police harassment. He admitted to taking an intoxicant and sedatives. Toxicology tests confirmed the presence of a hard substance, which causes impaired judgment and confusion. At Leeds Crown Court, both Kieran Earnshaw and Luke Gaukroger pleaded guilty to the murder of Robert Wilson and to causing grievous bodily harm with intent to John Badejo. The court was told that the attack was both prolonged and deliberate. The judge presiding over the case emphasized on the brutality of the act and its lasting impact on the victim's family. Earnshaw was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years. Gaukroger, due to his younger age and level of involvement, received life with a minimum term of 16 years and 8 months. The judge noted that both defendants had a history of concerning behavior, particularly Earnshaw, whose prior knife offense at school demonstrated a pattern. The court lifted previous restrictions on naming Gaukroger, allowing both defendants to be publicly identified. Neither Earnshaw nor Gaukroger spoke during the sentencing hearing. However, the court acknowledged a letter of apology had been submitted, in which one of the teenagers described the incident as the worst night of his life. Both individuals were placed in separate secure facilities upon sentencing. Kieran Earnshaw was initially held at HMP Leeds before he was transferred to HMP Frankland, a Category A prison. Luke Gaukroger, due to his age, was first detained in a youth offender institution and later transferred to an adult prison facility upon reaching 18. As of March 2025, Kieran Earnshaw has served just over 5 years of his life sentence at HMP Frankland. He remains incarcerated and will not be eligible for parole until at least 2042, when he will be 41 years old. Luke Gaukroger has served just over 5 years and is currently held in HMP Moorland. He will not be eligible for release until at least 2036, when he will be 32 years old. Both remain in custody. Number 14, 18-year-old Leandro Lopes, on the evening of April 27, 2023, in a residence on Elliott Drive, Felling, Gateshead, 18-year-old Leandro Lopes, alongside 17-year-old Jordan Tams and 15-year-old Cretia Beyonce Stroud, carried out a fatal attack that resulted in the murder of 40-year-old Gary Belfield and the attempted murder of his son, Luke Williams. Leandro Lopes was 18 years old at the time of the offense. He had moved to the United Kingdom from Portugal at the age of 7 and was raised in Biker, Newcastle. He experienced a troubled upbringing, reportedly surrounded by criminal influences and subjected to bullying throughout his youth. Lopes had a known history of violence, having previously taken part in attacks with local gangs targeting lone individuals. His background was described during the trial as one shaped by instability and exposure to normalized violence. Jordan Tams, 17, was from Wesley Court, Felling. He had been found previously in possession of a knife and had boasted in messages about wanting to use the knife on others. Cretia Stroud, 15, was from Eastcote Terrace, Walker. She had no prior criminal convictions, but was described as having experienced abandonment, abuse, and exploitation throughout her life. According to evidence presented at Newcastle Crown Court, the attack was premeditated and motivated by a personal dispute. Prosecutors stated that Stroud orchestrated the assault after alleging that Luke Williams had assaulted one of her relatives. The plan was described as having something to do with revenge. At approximately 9 p.m. on April 27, 2023, Lopes and Tams arrived at Gary Belfield's home on Elliott Drive, wearing masks and armed with a knife and a screwdriver. They entered the property while Stroud remained outside. Inside, they launched a coordinated and violent attack. Gary Belfield, a father of 6 who had recently moved to Tyneside from Manchester, was brutally used a knife on multiple times. He sustained 11 significant injuries, including deep wounds to his thigh and back. He collapsed on a sofa and bled to death at the scene. His son, Luke Williams, who was in his 20s, was also stabbed repeatedly. Despite his injuries, he escaped the property and ran to a nearby garage where a mechanic administered emergency aid, likely saving his life. On the way, he passed Stroud, who appeared visibly surprised to see him alive. Emergency services arrived shortly after, and Mr. Belfield was declared dead at the scene. Williams recovered shortly after undergoing some treatment. All 3 individuals were arrested and charged with murder and attempted murder. The trial commenced at Newcastle Crown Court and lasted 4 weeks. The jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges in December 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence including voice messages found on Tam's phone in which he made threats of violence, and testimony suggesting Stroud had acted as the instigator of the incident. Witnesses also recounted the lack of remorse displayed by the defendants, with reports that they laughed and joked during court sessions. Mr. Justice Constable, who presided over the trial, lifted standard reporting restrictions on the 2 younger defendants due to the gravity of the offense. He stated that the attack demonstrated extreme brutality and that Stroud's role, though not physical, was critical. Without her coordination, the event would not have occurred. On January 11, 2024, all 3 defendants were sentenced to detention at His Majesty's pleasure, a life sentence for juvenile offenders. Lopes and Tams each received a minimum term of 26 years before being eligible for parole. Stroud received a minimum term of 20 years. During sentencing, the court heard impact statements from Gary Belfield's father and Luke Williams. Mr. Belfield was remembered as a hard-working Amazon delivery driver and a dedicated father. His father described the murder as senseless and said it had a far-reaching impact on the entire family. Luke Williams said he had no doubt he would have died if he had not escaped. He stated that the attack was intentional and that the intruders asked no questions, indicating a predetermined purpose. He referred to the perpetrators as vile human beings and expressed a hope that they would live a long life burdened by regret. Throughout the proceedings, none of the defendants expressed remorse. Stroud was reported to have boasted about the attack in its aftermath. Lopes remained silent during sentencing and gave no personal statement to the court. Following sentencing, all 3 were transferred to youth offender institutions. Leandro Lopes was sent to HMP Weatherby, a facility specializing in young male offenders. As of May 2025, Leandro Lopes has served just over 1 year of his sentence. He was 18 years old at the time of the offense, and under the terms of his sentence will not be eligible for parole until he is at least 44 years old. 16-year-old Danyal Haig. Danyal Haig was 16 years old at the time of the incident that led to the death of 14-year-old Justin McLaughlin. Haig, a teenager from the Glasgow area, had a background marked by instability and exposure to violence. By his mid-teens, he was regularly consuming hard substances and intoxicating drinks. He also had prior encounters with law enforcement, including his attack on a man with a garden fork, and had previously been caught carrying a knife. On the afternoon of October 16, 2021, a confrontation occurred at High Street Railway Station in Glasgow between two groups of teenagers. Haig, carrying a knife in his rucksack, arrived at the station around the same time as Justin McLaughlin and his friends. CCTV footage showed Haig running toward the group. A clash broke out during which Haig pulled the knife from his bag. In the commotion, the knife was dropped onto the railway track. Haig jumped onto the tracks, retrieved the blade, and rejoined the confrontation. As the group scattered, Haig pursued them along the platform. As they were running, Justin McLaughlin tripped and fell. As he tried to stand back up, Haig ran up to him and used the knife on him once in his vital organ. The wound penetrated so deep and caused severe harm to Justin. Friends of the victim tried to assist him, and he was heard pleading for his mother. Emergency services transported him to hospital, but unfortunately, he did not survive. The incident was captured on station surveillance, providing clear evidence of the sequence of events. After the attack, Haig fled the scene and later disposed of the knife in a bin. He was arrested shortly after and charged with murder. During the trial at the High Court in Glasgow, he admitted to using the knife on Justin, but denied any intent to murder him. His defense argued that the knife had been carried for self-protection, claiming that his client had been assaulted the day before the incident. Haig stated that he aimed for the lower abdomen and intended only to cause a minor injury. When asked by his defense counsel how he felt about the incident, he expressed remorse, telling the court and Justin's family, "It was never my intention to murder anybody." However, prosecutors argued that his actions demonstrated clear intent to cause serious harm. They emphasized that after the scuffle had ended, Haig was no longer under threat, but chose to pursue and murder the unarmed boy. The jury found Danyal Haig guilty of murder in June 2023. The sentencing took place at the High Court in Edinburgh. The judge presiding over the case imposed a life sentence with a minimum term of 16 years before parole eligibility. He described the act as a brutal murder and highlighted its devastating effect on the victim's family. The judge noted that Justin was in a defenseless position when the fatal blow was delivered. During the sentencing, Justin McLaughlin's family described him as the blue-eyed boy of the household. His younger siblings were particularly affected by the loss. He was their best friend, as well as a brother. The family stated that their lives would never be the same, citing knife crime as the cause of their devastation. Following the sentencing, Haig was transferred to HMP Polmont, a young offenders institution in central Scotland. As of March 2025, Danyal Haig has served approximately 3 years of his life sentence. He was 16 at the time of the crime and 18 at the time of sentencing. He will be eligible for parole at age 32, having served the minimum 16-year term. 19-year-old Danyal Harris. From February 2021 to March 2022, Danyal Harris, a teenager from Glossop, Derbyshire, uploaded a series of far-right extremist videos to the internet. He was 17 when he began producing this material, posting under the alias Bookanon on platforms like World Truth Videos. Harris created and shared videos that promoted violent ideologies, glorified mass shooters, and encouraged viewers to commit acts of terror. The content of these videos included praise for several known extremists. One video celebrated Thomas Mair, the man who murdered British MP Joe Cox in 2016. Another video referred to Brenton Tarrant, the Australian who murdered 51 Muslims during the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, as a saint. He also called for the total extermination of subhumans, a phrase repeated across his published content. These videos did not remain in obscurity. One of them, titled How to Achieve Victory, was later shared online by Peyton Gendron, who went on to fatally shoot 10 black people at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, in May 2022. Prosecutors noted that Harris's videos were influential, with Judge Patrick Field, KC, stating during sentencing that Harris's materials had, at the very least, some influence upon Gendron. Authorities also discovered links between Harris's online content and Anderson Lee Aldrich, the suspected gunman in the November 2022 shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs that left 5 people dead and 25 injured. One of Harris's videos appeared on a platform closely tied to Aldrich's online activity before the attack. Harris's actions gained the attention of UK counter-terrorism policing. Detectives opened an investigation after finding that Harris had attempted to manufacture a firearm using a 3D printer. The court heard that while he was unsuccessful, the attempt represented a clear intention to carry out violence. The investigation revealed that Harris had been referred to the UK's Prevent program, an initiative designed to intervene in early-stage radicalization. However, he continued to produce and disseminate extremist content throughout his participation in the program. Authorities ultimately determined that Harris had not been groomed by others, but was instead acting independently with the intent to radicalize others. Detective indicated that on the surface, Harris presents as an unassuming, quiet young man, but when you scratch the surface and it's a more sinister picture. He added that Harris's consistent online activity posed such a threat that they had to act in order to ensure the safety of the wider public. Harris was arrested and later charged with multiple terrorism offenses. In December 2022, he was convicted of 5 counts of encouraging terrorism and 1 count of possession of material for terrorist purposes. The possession charge stemmed from his attempt to create a gun using a 3D printer. During sentencing in February 2023, the judge described Harris as highly dangerous and a propagandist for an extremist right-wing ideology. He noted that Harris had shown no remorse and had lied about his past actions, even describing his defacement of a George Floyd memorial in Manchester as no more than a blip. The court also heard about Harris's background. He had been withdrawn from mainstream schooling at the age of 7, and his defense lawyer argued that there were quite disgraceful failings by his family and the local authority in handling his upbringing. On February 3, 2023, Harris was sentenced at Manchester Crown Court to 11.5 years in a young offenders institution. Upon release, he will serve an additional 3 years on extended license under supervision. As of March 2025, Danyal Harris has served just over 2 years of his 11.5-year sentence. He was 19 at the time of his sentencing and will be approximately 30 years old by the time of his scheduled release. He remains incarcerated in a UK young offenders institution under terrorism-related charges. Thank you guys for watching till the end. What case do you want me to cover in the part 2 of this video? Leave a comment below.